Islam Makhachev is set to fight Arman Tsarukyan for UFC 311, and this is a really exciting fight because these are probably the most well-rounded fighters in the top 15. They have similar styles, competent on the feet, competent on the ground. Wherever it goes, those guys are ready. I believe Islam is the 2.0 version of Arman Tsarukyan. He's literally better than Arman in almost every area of mixed martial arts. But this is MMA and anything can happen. I mean, Derek Lewis knocked out Volkov. Volk had a competitive fight with Islam. Dominic Reyes arguably beat John Jones, but on paper, John Jones is the better fighter. So in MMA, you just have to remember that both of these guys are human at the end of the day, and they both have a chin. They both bleed. They're both prone to fatigue. They can lose. Any one of them can lose, and that's the beauty of gambling. Just when you think your parlay is about to hit, and you have one obvious fight where you bet on the huge betting favorite, then he loses. Next thing you know, you lose a 12 fight parlay, and it wasn't the even fight that you lost. It was the fight that you thought was gonna be one sided, and it just ended up being one sided, but not in your favor. So this is a fight that I would not bet on. I would not bet on it. I have a lot of experience with betting. I would say I've won most of my parlays. I do well because I bet smart. I don't get too greedy. I bet on the obvious fights. I do extensive research on it, and if there's even the slightest bit of evidence that one fighter is going to beat a certain one, I won't bet on that fighter. If it's too even, I don't like betting on those because if it can go either way, you're basically gambling your whole parlay. The only way I see Arman Tsarukyan winning is either by decision or a KO slash TKO. Because submission wise, I check UFC stats and Arman has never submitted anyone in the UFC. He usually wins unanimous decision, split decision, or TKO. Whereas Islam, on the other hand, out of his 15 UFC wins, 7 of them were submissions. But Arman Tsarukyan is not Drew Dober. Arman Tsarukyan is not Charles Oliveira. I don't think Islam is going to be able to submit Arman. If he does, I'll be really impressed because Arman, he just won't tap, and I think he's very physical. He's got very good genetics, very strong. I think he can make his way out of any submission attempt Islam has for him. For instance, we saw he was in a very, very, very tight guillotine when he was fighting Charles Oliveira, and he didn't tap. He managed to survive. I think any other top 15 fighter, possibly even Islam, would have tapped in that scenario, but Arman didn't. Maybe Islam would make it out, but I think anyone else outside of Arman and Islam in the top 15, they would have tapped. They would have tapped, but Arman didn't. So I don't see Islam beating Arman by submission. KO maybe. I think Islam is just he's just very conservative about how he approaches his striking. He just makes sure he never does too much. He never overextends. He just keeps it technical, keeps his hands up, circles the ring, good footwork. I don't think he's gonna be all risky. Like he's not gonna throw winded punches like Josh Emmett. Josh Emmett has a very high KO rate. One of the reasons is because he's willing to risk it for the biscuit. No diddy. He's willing to just go in there in the pocket and throw bombs with you, knowing that he's way more powerful than you. And if y'all both land at the same time, there's a high chance that you're gonna be the one who's laying unconscious on the ground. So Josh Emmett can afford to throw winded punches, whereas Islam Makhachev is powerful but not the heaviest hitter. So I don't think he'll want to approach it like that. He's probably going to be very technical. If he wins, I'm betting that he's going to win by decision. I don't like to bet methods, but if I did, I would say Islam is most probably going to win by decision because all the stats say so. Because as far as KOs go, I don't think Arman has ever faced someone as good as Islam in the realm of striking. Islam striking is top tier, man. I think he's one of the best strikers in the division. He outstruck what's this guy's name? Dustin Poirier. He outstruck Charles Oliveira. He knocked down Charles Oliveira shortly after submitted him. And the narrative going into that fight was that Charles Oliveira was the better striker and Islam was the better grappler. But when we saw them fight, I saw a completely different story. There was a whole narrative shift because I feel like Islam is just far more technical than Charles Oliveira. Charles gets hit a lot. He got knocked down by a 38-year-old Michael Chandler. I love Charles. He was one of my favorite fighters. In fact, I wanted him to win the fight against Islam, but he didn't. And that was when I just started watching MMA. Little did I know how capable Islam was, but now I have a good understanding of the sport. And I just don't see Arman winning. You know, he could win, but I'm more inclined to bet on Islam Makhachev. But like I said before, I'm probably not going to bet on this fight because of how close it is, despite what the UFC stats say. So you guys let me know who you think is going to win. Yeah,